It's another edition of the Wrap-Up Show with John Schaefer and Jim Russell. We're presented by Mark Nimitz at Farmers Insurance. If you have not subscribed to this show as of yet, if you're looking for year-round exclusive Padres content, you see Jim right there. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Give us a thumbs up if you're liking these videos. Follow us on Twitter as well, at John Schaefer, at Jim Russell SD. Before we get to today's topic, would Luis Rojas, the former Mets manager, be a good fit for the Padres? Let's tell you about our friend Mark Nimitz over at Farmers Insurance. If you're shopping for auto, home, renters, or life insurance here in San Diego, there's only one place to turn. That's to a San Diegan, Mark over at Farmers Insurance. He's got over a decade of experience. He's helping people like us find the perfect insurance products every single day. And what separates Mark from the competition is his customer service, his communication as well. Click the link down below. It's in the description. You'll get to Mark's website. Let him help you or your family with your insurance needs.
And if you want to reach out to Mark, all his information right above my head there. Phone number and email address, mnimitz@farmersagent.com. That's mnimitz@farmersagent.com.
So what do we think, Jim? Luis Rojas, the former Mets manager who was managing the same amount of time as Jace Tingler. His first managerial stint was with the Mets. It did not go well. Last place in 2020. Third place this past season. They kind of faded down the stretch comparably to the Padres. He has a very good lineage in terms of his history in this game. He's very well respected in this game. He has interviewed, according to multiple sources, for the Padres' vacant managerial position. What do we think about Luis Rojas, the former Mets manager, as a possible replacement for Jace Tingler in 2022?
I like him. And like you said, he is the son of Felipe Alou. He's the half-brother of Moises Alou. He's in the Padres organization. So there's good ties there. It kind of feels like a little bit the same. Like it could be an upgrade from Tingler, but it also could be like a lateral move as far as a manager goes, right? Like you fire a manager to upgrade. And is Luis Rojas a major upgrade over Jace Tingler? Could be, but from just outside looking in and just like, I don't feel like it is a major upgrade. You know, this clubhouse needs somebody that, like we've talked about, demands respect. A guy that hasn't had just a cup of coffee in the big leagues, you know, if you're going to go that route. Been there, done that. Has actually been through the wars of the baseball season and dealt with a full 162 game year. Now, Luis Rojas has, but he's only dealt with it for one season as a manager. He was a manager in 2020 when he got hired and replaced Carlos Beltran, but that was a 60-game season, and they finished fifth. And then last year, they finished third. So while it might be good for, like, you know, because of the relationship that he might have because of the Padres organization and the ties that are there, that's great. But is this an upgrade over Jace Tingler? Like, that's where my question comes with Luis Rojas is, if you're going to go the route of Luis Rojas, great. But is it really an upgrade over Jace Tingler? Because I feel like if you're going Luis Rojas, why did you get rid of Tingler?
Well, a couple of things. So if you have a chance to get Rojas on your staff, I think that would be seen as a positive. Now, if he could be a bench coach, we'll see if Skip Schumacher returns or moves on from the Padres. If you have a vacant bench spot, and if you teamed him with a veteran manager, I'm with you. It's completely different, but could he be the manager in waiting? I think that would be more desirable. Mm-hmm. To your point about Jace Tingler, I think some of the differences are that Rojas was a longtime minor league manager. Now it's different. It's completely different, but he has managerial experience. It wasn't like he was just thrust into that spot, although he kind of was because Carlos Beltran was ousted before the 2020 season. I think he was going to be the quality control coach before the 2020
first option. And that's a little bit of like a tiny red flag.
Yeah, I don't know if that alone is the red flag. I mean, I don't love the fact that the Mets had a comparable collapse to the Padres. I think the Mets are the first team in baseball history to sit in first place for 100 or more days and finish with a losing record. Yeah. They went 77 and 85. I mean, they could not hit. Yeah, I mean, they couldn't hit. I don't know if that's Luis Rojas' fault. They had tons of pitching injuries. Again, I don't know if that's on Luis Rojas, but we could say the same thing about Jace Tingler. There were injuries, and the team was not a good hitting team in the second half of the season. Ultimately, Tingler was the one to take the fall. So Here's what we know. Rojas is interviewed or is set
Mhm.
to interview. Mike Schilt has interviewed. We've seen a couple of other names tied to the position of Brad Ausmus, who's managed a couple of spots, including Anaheim. We've thrown out some other names here as well. Mike Sosha, who's managed for a long time in
Mhm.
Anaheim. I don't know if there's that perfect candidate, Jim, that checks all the boxes as of yet. I mean, Bruce Bochy, but we haven't really heard of an absurd amount of interest coming from either side as of yet. So if you have a Schilt, if you have a Rojas, I don't know where I'd lean there. Probably a Mike Schilt because he's a guy that has spent more time managing. He's had more success managing. But then again, maybe Luis Rojas would have done a better job managing if he was managing the Cardinals, right?
Right. It's about roster. Like we had Skip on yesterday, and if you missed that interview, click the link above right now to go listen to that. But he mentioned Steve Kerr's name, and I know it's a different sport, but if you have literally no players to work with and a bunch of injuries, you're going to look like a horrible coach. And if you have players that are healthy, then you're going to look like a great coach. So that does play a factor into it. And if you want to say also the differences between Rojas and Tingler, Rojas, it seemed like didn't lose that clubhouse. He also commanded that clubhouse. He got the respect of the players. And it felt like the coaching staff there, at least from reading things, like was all tied together. It's just they wanted to go a different route. They needed a new, front office man, general manager, president of baseball operations. So of course, whoever they hire wants to bring in their own guy. That's a little different situation than here. But here it was a little bit of the opposite. It felt like players didn't really have Tingler's back as much as Rojas's. There was problems with the coaching staff. The word that we keep hearing is alignment. Like the alignment in the Padres organization is not where it needs to be. And that is what needs to happen is they need to get alignment with whoever they bring in as the next manager of this team. And maybe that's Rojas because of his ties with the Padres organization. But I just kind of feel like it might be like a lateral move. And he could turn out great. And I would much rather prefer Rojas on this staff in like a bench coach role, like a high bench coach role than the manager. Because I don't mean it just doesn't again like it doesn't excite me as much as the guys that I want them to hire, which is Ron Washington or Bruce Bochy.
Right. And neither of which, we've heard a really strong tie as of yet
Right.
during this managerial search. I mean, I think one of the things about Rojas is this attachment, obviously, and, familial relationship with Moises Alou. Maybe that goes a
Mm-hmm.
long way for the Padres and AJ Preller. I mean, that's a possibility. What type of relationship does he have with Ruben Niebla, who we believe is going to be the next pitching coach of the Padres? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Ruben Niebla and Luis Rojas have some marvelous relationship. Maybe they've never spent any time together. What type of relationship would the Mike Schilt have with a Ruben Niebla? I don't know the answers to this. And the fact that it's become public that the Padres have expressed serious interest in Niebla and many believe he will be the next Padres pitching coach, maybe we're behind the curtain to some extent in terms of where they are with this managerial search. As in maybe a manager has signed off on a Niebla and we're just not aware of that.
Yeah.
This was always going to be an interesting search. I think if it wasn't going to be Bruce Bochy, then, there were going to be some question marks. Even if it was Ron Washington, people were going to say, well, what about some of the off the field issues? He hasn't
But there
managed since
wouldn't be as many question
2014.
marks as if they hire like Ausmus or Rojas or a guy like that.
There wouldn't be as many if they hired. You're saying if they hired Ausmus?
No. I'm saying if they hired
Gotcha. If
Bochy
they went,
or Ron
yeah.
Washington, the question marks it wouldn't be as many question marks as if you hire Rojas or Ausmus.
That's true. I agree with that. And look at the managers in the World Series. The veteran Brian Snitker and the veteran Dusty Baker. Like, what's wrong with that route? Maybe there's a problem with it from AJ Preller's perspective because he runs his front office a different way, and the analytics are more important. But I don't know if I buy that. I mean, are analytics not important for Houston over this last 5-year run? I find a hard time believing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's what's the priority of the front office? I think the priority of the front office. We keep seeing some of these younger names popping up, like a Luis Rojas or even a Mike Schilt, who's not a veteran manager. He's managed for 3.5 seasons in the big leagues. We're not seeing the names, Jim. Maybe we are. Mike Sosha his name has popped up. But I mean, I think we're seeing just as many names of guys that have managed for 1, 2, or 3 years in the big leagues than guys that have managed for 15 or 20 years.
And the thing with Luis Rojas, if they hire him, you know, this is it for Preller. Like, this is his last hire, and you got to get this one right. You just have to. And the Luis Rojas hiring signals to me a little bit like he doesn't feel like his job's on the line. And maybe he does behind closed doors, but if I'm him and I know that I have to get this right no matter what, I go out and get a guy that's been there before and done it and been to a World Series, navigated through a 162 game season, veteran manager, and then I try to bring Luis Rojas onto the staff. But if you're going to hire Rojas as manager, I just, again, you're risking a lot here with this hire, Preller. You're risking a lot, and we said the same thing when you hired Tingler, maybe to a more like bigger extent, because no one knew who Jace Tingler was. People know who Luis Rojas just because he managed the Mets last year and past 2 years. But again, it feels like the same path if they hire Luis Rojas as you did with Andy Green and Jace Tingler. It just feels a little bit the same. And I mean, hey, good on Preller if he wants to do this, but guess what? Your job's on the line. And I feel like if I'm him, I want to have as little questions and as little uncertainty going into next season with my manager than you would get if you hired Luis Rojas.
And to your point, just to wrap it up here, I mean, if Tingler lost his job and he made the postseason in 2020, Rojas had the exact same 2021. I mean, it was the exact same. I mean, to be in first place for that long and then to have a second half collapse that obviously angered Mets fans and management to the point that his option was not picked up for 2022. Again, he might be a good long-term answer. He's only 40.
I know.
He's only 40 years of age. Does he need to be the next hire for the Padres, or could he be a good managerial option in a half decade or a decade of time?
Yeah.
Could he be a good bench coach? Maybe he was interviewed for that. I mean, maybe he's willing to sit on the bench of a future Padres manager, but we've heard that he has interviewed for the managerial vacancy with the Padres. The question for you, you can put it in the description down below. Would Luis Rojas be a good fit as Padres manager? And again, this reminder, if you have not subscribed to the wrap-up show, please do so. If you're looking for year-round Padres content, we've got you covered for this managerial search. If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up. Follow us on Twitter at John Schaefer, at Jim Russell SD. Until next time, this has been the wrap-up show presented by Mark Nimitz at Farmers Insurance.